And the emission rates for you guys is so low that if the whole world killed all its cattle and buried them 7 feet under, it wouldn't make a measurable difference. If CO2, they say, will give somewhere between 1.5 and 4.5 degrees, no matter which of those, and 4.5 is now ruled out, 3 is ruled out. But even if it gave that, what would methane do? 0.45. Nobody says that's a big deal. And certainly not a big deal compared to CO2, which it's saying you guys are doing nothing that can be measured. And so to ruin either plant life for lack of fertilizer in Sri Lanka, cattle in Ireland, in Holland, this is insanity. That adding CO2 will cause some warming. Probably no more than 1% agree that it is an existential threat. Years ago, there's something in the socialist mentality that yearns for vegetarianism. Don't ask me why. If you go to the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, and they issue tons of reports, and all except one each time is by bureaucrats. But there is one that is the science report. It is about 1,000 pages. It's unreadable. If you bother to go through it and your livelihoods are at stake, the welfare of Ireland is at stake, it probably pays to look at it, because nowhere in that does it suggest that we're dealing with an existential threat. The threat it's talking about is one that says by 2100, the GDP, at least in the US, will be 200% of what it is today, but due to climate change, it'll only be 197%. That doesn't sound like an existential threat to me. This issue is there is no point at all at which it's right, including the metric for climate, this global mean temperature anomaly. I mean, the Earth has dozens of climate regimes. Each of them has a different physical meaning. They're not all in lockstep with that 1 degree change in 150 years. But the trouble with that is everyone looking at it, depending on what their specialty is, said that's wrong. And, so they focus on that. One will say, well, it's not CO2, it's the solar cycle. But the solar cycle is also only one thing. Climate is not one thing. You have people saying, well, there was the medieval optimum. And others say, but it's only Europe. And for the Earth as a whole, it averaged out to 0. Hey, that says for a couple of 100 years, Europe was warmer than it is today. And for a couple of 100 years, the rest of the world was colder. Is that not a climate change? Of course it is. But they're saying since it averaged it out, it doesn't count. That's stupid. But the problem is every point along the way is stupid. And you get stuck on the one you're familiar with, and you forget that the whole thing makes no sense. When it comes to methane and nitrous oxide, none of that matters. You've got an ironclad case against it. And even if the jet planes caused a problem, you're not. Understand why the molecules are so powerful. It's because you have so few of them. If you had so little CO2, granted you wouldn't have life if you had so little CO2, it too would be very powerful. But after the first 50 parts per million, it began saturating. Actually, what I'm saying is you could go to the extreme of getting rid of all your cattle in the whole world, and it wouldn't make a difference. And that doesn't depend on your model, and it doesn't depend on your theory of climate change. I mean, what more could you ask for if you had to defend yourself on it?